tonight for our love of Her Eminence Lady Zainab alayhi salam and Sayyida Kulthum salamullahi alayha. Please recite aloud Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ثم جعلناك على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين. هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our sixth night, in which we are looking at our series regarding Islam in Britain and Britain in Islam in this forthcoming decade. Our last two nights we have been looking at, in conjunction with the Maqasid al-Sharia, which tells us our priorities in any given time, that Britain, many other places around the world, are losing both belief in God and God centricity within society. And therefore it is upon the Muslim community to do tasheeh of the aqaid, either to ensure that those who have a misunderstanding of their belief systems are corrected and assisted, or where God himself is being removed from the public space in order to bring around a Britain that is going to flourish in the name of God, we need to be able to assist in re-establishing God in the public space. Thereafter, last night, this made a logical leap that if bringing God to British society again is the center point of our religious duty, we also realize that there is an attack on God and an attack on Muslim youth specifically. That's manifesting itself in a number of ways. It is being used through the sword of, for example, atheist movements. There is also the liberal movement. There is the ultra-secularist movement. When people move to being post-traditionalist, they are also being picked off. And then there is the specific Islamophobia industry, which is trying to take our Muslim youth out of their belief systems. Sadly, Muslim communities do feel under threat. We mentioned yesterday as an example, the Yaqeen Institute in their survey found that 2/3 of Muslim youth did not feel confident enough to say that they are Muslim in public. This means that youth are being challenged, and we need to ensure that we're able to bring them the arguments, help them to reaffirm in their hearts the matters of faith in God and in Islam, and particularly with the defense of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Yesterday's homework was asking, where do we go from here? We were saying that if now we realize that protecting our faith and exporting our faith is the central tool of our challenge for the next decade, what's the next challenge in this series that we want to talk about? Now, if you recall, we mentioned that hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon his family, in which he says, لا خير في الوطن إلا مع الأمن والسرور. There is no value to living in a place unless there is security, there is that safety, and there is that spiritual happiness, that spiritual satisfaction that is within the heart. Now, in regards to that, it becomes obvious that not only are Muslims at threat in a certain way, but with the rise of both fascism in the world and the ideology of the far right, specifically in Britain, there is not only a threat to the Muslim community, but also all minorities are at threat in Britain. Therefore, it means that if we want to ensure we are living in a place which gives us that aman, that gives us that security, the next challenge for us in Britain is understanding why the far right is rising and how we are able to respond properly, not just in terms of things like our akhlaq, but also strategically in terms of ensuring that this phenomenon is once again defeated like it was temporarily defeated some 70 years ago after World War II. Therefore, our topic tonight, inshallah, will be asking this question around understanding the views, the values, the actual movement of the far right, and how we are able to counter that, not only as a Muslim community, but also in terms of bringing other minorities together to fight this battle that needs to be fought so urgently around the world and also in Britain today. Let's take a step back from the discourse around Britain and just for a minute be conscious of the extent of this challenge of the rise of proto-fascism around the world. If, for example, you look across the world, far-right insurgency has once again gripped the political discourse. In Burma, where Muslims are being massacred, when we saw the last couple of years of the Rohingya being massacred, Time magazine actually did a number of stories on this and linked the example of what was going on with those Buddhist monks to being very similar to what happened in Weimar Germany, calling them similar to the rise of the new Hitler. If, for example, we look at what's happening in Brazil, a far-right government has come in. If we look, for example, in India, Modi's government is no different to a far-right government pushing Hindu nationalism. I have been to India twice to recite in Muharram, and speaking to them there is a real concern, especially in the villages where there is less security, where there is less of a strong police force, and we have seen many attacks on the Muslim community taking place. Of course, what's happening in Kashmir at the moment is a great example of the extent of proto-fascism, colonization coming around again, and acting with complete impudence and saying that we will just do what we want. These are examples. Then, of course, if we come to the United States of America, we come to Europe, it is very well known the extent of the far right and how much power that they are gaining in numbers of different countries, be it in Germany, be it in Portugal, be it in Austria, be it in Hungary. Across Europe, the far right has risen, and in some cases, such as in France, we are now seeing that parts of the country, it is 40% of the country are in agreement with far-right politics. This should worry us, and we should be very aware of what's happening in our own country. Locally, we know that there are a number of discussions taking place and incidents that have taken place, be it mosques that have been attacked, or very local to home, you know that the MP, Jo Cox, was murdered here, or she is an MP of Leeds, off the back of far-right extremism. We also know that much of the discussion around Rotherham has been utilized as a means of hitting Muslims over the head with a stick. And so all of these things coming together should be an awakening for the Muslim community that there is something serious happening in front of its eyes. And it's very easy for us to see how quickly things can swing towards the far right. As an example of how quick it can swing, the discussion around Brexit needs to be a central example of that. The Tory party, particularly David Cameron, when he decided to allow for this referendum to take place, an important question should be asked: why would he have allowed this referendum to take place? Really, there is, a can of worms that have been opened in the last 3-4 years since this discourse has taken place. Why did David Cameron allow this in the first place? Not even allow it. Why was this seen as a realistic solution to a problem that they were having? The answer is, number one, that the Tory party were hemorrhaging votes. Hemorrhaging in the sense that people didn't want to vote for them, both in terms of mainstream and those on the right fringes of the political spectrum. They were leaving and going towards people like UKIP, going towards other extremist ideas. The second was that the demographics are changing. Typically, the Tory party appeals to a certain mindset. Yes, a certain colour, yes, a certain age, but also a certain mindset. And amongst the mindsets would be those who are certain affluent, they want to have their own businesses protected, they want to have their taxes protected. And so even many Muslims vote for the Conservative Party, even though they know how much of a damage it is to society overall, because they want to protect their own interests. So now, when people are leaving because of the demographic changes in this country, younger people, immigrants are coming into this country, and they're not going to vote for that kind of thing, and because much of the electorate is shifting towards the right, David Cameron decided to make a tactical maneuver which said that if I allow a discussion to take place about immigration, if I look like I'm allowing this from the Tory party, maybe we can pull back some of those voters that are going towards the far right, that feel like their solutions are with UKIP, maybe they will be able to come back to a more centre-right polity. So what did they do? They allowed for the Brexit discussion to take place. This was prefaced by going to Brussels and arguing for more things that they needed, negotiating for more things that they needed with Brussels. Brussels gave them so much. In fact, there are certain laws that the Tory party decided not to even employ. As an example, under EU rules, most people don't know this, but under EU rules, if anyone from the EU migrates to another country in the EU and doesn't find work within the first 3 months, the government has the right to send them back. So all this discussion about immigrants coming and taking over space, not finding jobs, going on the dole, all of this kind of rhetoric that you hear from the far right, there is actually law within EU, and that even British law allows, that would send those who did not find jobs to go back. But they decided not to uphold these particular laws. And despite having a negotiation with Brussels, they then went back and said that they didn't get enough from it in order to satisfy the electorate. Most people don't even know what the negotiations were about, let alone satisfying the electorate. So as a response to all of these failed negotiations, wink wink, let's bring back part of the far right towards the Tory party. How will we do that? We will have a referendum on leaving the European Union. This, of course, backfired. And when it backfired spectacularly. Because certain individuals dragged the entire discussion even further right, and even dragged the Tory party further right. There was a seminal moment, a moment that changed our history in this country, and arguably that moment was when Nigel Farage unleashed that poster with all of those poor Syrian refugees fleeing, bombs being dropped on them, and the title said, "Breaking Point. This is what is coming into your country." That dragged the discussion so far right, and then Boris Johnson jumped on the bandwagon, and even on the night before the referendum vote, this is true, night before the referendum vote, he actually wrote 2 articles, one arguing we should stay in, and one arguing that we should stay out. Only on the night before the referendum, he decided, I'm going to put all of my chips on the out and make it look like I'm there. Not believing that it would get anywhere. Believing that maybe the vote would come 25%, 30%, and he could always then say, look, I've been with you. When I become Prime Minister, I can bring the votes back towards the Tory party. What happened? We are all left in a situation in this country and across Europe where now the politics are changing off the back of this. We can see that the rise of the far right is taking place. We need to understand how that is affecting the Muslim communities. So therefore, our discussion tonight is going to be based around 2 things. Number 1, what are the arguments, the debate points that the far right have? Because if you're going to challenge, if you're going to be able to respond, you need to understand what their arguments are. Number 1. And number 2, we're going to look at how we can respond in terms of strategic planning to be able to defeat the rise of the far right. And we will do so, inshallah, by looking at certain examples from the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. First things first, we need to demonstrate how serious the far right is in terms of affecting the Muslim community and affecting the entirety of the discourse in this country. So I brought with me certain statistics that I want to read out and give you a flavor of what's happening in the country. Number 1, 18% of the country believe that Muslims are migrating here for the purpose of making it a Muslim majority country. Right? That's almost 1 in 5. So 1 out of every 5 people that you see on the street, you can basically say, this is from YouGov and other reputable sources, 18% believe that Muslims come here so that they can become the majority country. And then eventually, we will bring in Sharia law. Of course, that's a nonsensical term because Sharia and law are completely different things. Now, how much percentage, what is the actual percentage of Muslim population in this country? Anyone know? 6.5%. 6.5%. So, if we're going to make this 51% majority Muslim country, you all have to get very busy. Because it won't be done through immigration. Yeah? We're going to need lots and lots of children to be able to do that. 31% of young children in this country think that Muslims are taking over England. That's a specific statement, specific wording. So 18% think that we're coming here in droves to take over, and 31% of young children think we are already taking over. Right? And then, as you know, when you see Muslims in parliament, Muslims on the TV, this only adds to that type of understanding. 37% of Brits, 37%, so that's more than 1 in every 3. 37% of Brits support a political, or would support a political party if that political party was to campaign on the basis of reducing the number of Muslims in the UK. In fact, in the previous election cycle, it was in their manifesto for a period of time. UKIP actually said, if we get in, we will pay every Muslim X amount of thousands of pounds to leave the country. That was there. I don't remember how much it was. Might have been something like £5,000 or something minor. I'd leave for a lot more. I mean, you know, 6-7 figures, then we would talk about it. No. 32% of the country believe that there are no-go areas. You know what those no-go areas are, right? Like, non-Muslims are not allowed into that area. You're not allowed alcohol in that area. You're not allowed pork in that area. 1 in 3 non-Muslims actually believe that that's the case. 35% believe that Islam is a threat to the British way of life. 76% of male Muslims are less likely to be employed than their white counterparts. White Christian counterparts. There was a study that was published several months back called the Missing Muslims Report. It should be famous in this community because Sayyid was actually mentioned in the report. Yeah? So it was a brilliant study talking about how often the state of Muslims in this country in the public sphere, in terms of poverty, in terms of their role in the workplace and the public space. I would make ourselves very much aware of this type of report to understand what is actually happening in the ground, but also to understand what's happening in, say, less economically developed areas of the country. It's very important to understand the conversation that's going on the ground. Now, these are certain stats, which 1 or 2 we will come back to in a minute's time, inshallah. But based on this, I think it's evident that in terms of the thinking of the far right, and also the establishment of the far right in this country, we should be very well aware that it's on our doorstep. It's already part and parcel of the country's discourse. And the government itself is making things very difficult for Muslims. The question I pose now is, what are the belief systems of the far right? And I'm going to look at 4 in particular, and then as these 4 become normalized, mainstream, believed ideas, how then that manifests itself into the mainstream discourse, and then ultimately affects everyone across the country, and the way in which people think across the country. So there are 4, and please note these down on your phone, even if you need to just jot the names down so you have them, and then you know this is the way in which the far right argue these points, and then inshallah if you ever need, you can go back and start thinking about some of these things and specifics around the arguments that they have. Number 1, the first major belief that they have is that races cannot mix. Races cannot mix. Now the first thing is that of course that they believe in race. The idea that you are born into a certain group of people which makes you inherently better or worse, stronger or weaker, smarter or dumber than any other race. This came about in terms of science in the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries. And there's a number of different books that were written off the back of science to say that there is such a thing as race. And you know what they did? All of these different scholars from America, from Britain, from Germany at that time, they would actually divide people into different types of races. Sometimes there were 3 races, sometimes there were 4 races, sometimes there were 5 races. What does that tell you? If it's scientific, it should be accurate. The fact that sometimes people are dividing you into 6 races, or 2 races, or 8 races, this color, this name, that name, it shows it's completely arbitrary, doesn't it? If I now say, these are the red people, these are the black people, these are the white people, and these are the yellow people, and then another scholar comes along and just says that there are 3 colors, if it's factual, then it's either one or the other. But if I divide you into 10, or scientifically I can divide you into 20 groups or 2 groups, then clearly there's no such thing as race. And there isn't. It's a social construct. You can divide humanity into as many or as few groups as you decide, depending on what type of divisions you want to make. But because people, and I emphasize this over and over again to you, because Muslims don't read the Quran, don't look at what the Ahlul Bayt alayhimussalam say, they adopt these external ideas and then actually imbibe them, believe them, and then perpetuate these ideas. They were, funnily enough, created in order to make you, all of you Muslims, a lower race than everybody else. You want equality in the world? You have to defeat the idea of race, essentially, that race exists. However, there was one scholar that made a huge jump, and then his works were taken even further until today. Everybody needs to know these works to understand where the far right get their entire ideas from. And the main idea came from a person by the name of Joseph Comte du Gobineau. He wrote a particular work which argued that races should not mix. Why? Because if you believe that races have different strengths and weaknesses, if I divide this room into two halves and I said, you guys have A, B, and C strengths, and these guys have A, B, and C weaknesses, if you mix, if you sit with them, if you marry with them, if you participate in life with them, you will bring them down. Does that make sense? So would you guys want to mix with them if they're going to bring you down to their level? No, of course not. So when you hear this idea that Islam is inherently violent, what they're actually saying is the West is peaceful. Therefore, if we bring Muslims over, if we allow these Muslimics and their ray guns to come over, then what will happen? We will also become violent. These Muslimics, they're backwards in their thinking. They are oppressive. They are this, they are that. If we allow them to participate in our society, the moment two races mix, it's not that they will pull us up. Well, that was one argument the other night, right? That we're not civilized people. We're not humanized people. We need to be raised. That's one element. The other idea is, no, we will pull the rest of the world down. As you know, social Darwinism took this argument to its nth degree by saying that ultimately those who are the weakest will die out, those who are the strongest, they will survive. And so, in order for us to continue the survival of our civilization, we can't mix it with their civilization. Let theirs die out, because theirs will die out anyway, because they are violent, because these Muslims kill each other, because they are oppressive to one another. And let us in the West just continue to live and be the perfect race. This is the first argument. Races should not mix, off the basis of the idea that there is such a thing as race. This is the first argument of the far right. The second is the Great Replacement Theory. GRT. Great Replacement Theory. Simply that these poor people over here, all the Muslimics, as we said earlier, they are moving to the West so that they can replace white people. They can marry in, change the genes, convert everybody, and then over a period of time, replace Western civilization with Muslim civilization. Therefore, the argument is, just like in the Crusades, we need to go back and protect Christian civilization and defeat Muslim civilization. What did we say earlier on? 18% of people believe that Muslims are coming to this country so that they can replace white people. And 31% of children believe that that's already happening. This is the second argument of those in the far right. The third is a really interesting one, and I'm going to ask you guys to help me out with this, because I know it can be a little bit taxing to think about the beliefs of the far right. It's not the most fun thing in the world, is it? But let's try to work together on this. Third great argument is that all these different groups and minorities in society, they need to be homogenized. So Muslims have one set of values, whereas there is another thing called British values. Have you heard that? Yeah? So now all of us in this one room, apparently, we have one set of values. And of course, those set of values come off the back of us being a less civilized race. So because we believe in violence, because we believe in oppression, those are our homogenized values. What do I mean by homogenized? where we're just grouped together into that particular belief system, and all of our values, irrespective of who you are as an individual or me as an individual, we're all grouped together. And of course, those Muslim values, which are homogenized, are antithetical to the so-called British values. I want to ask you an honest, simple question. Help me to understand this. What are British values? Genuinely. Help me out here. Anyone, please tell me, what is a British value? Something that is specific to Britain. What's a value that is specifically British? Fish and chips? Fish and chips, that's a good one. I think maybe tea? No, stole that from India. Huh? So when they say, oh, the Brits, they like to drink tea, right? It's not really from Britain. So I'm asking seriously, because this is, help me unpack this. When you sit with people and they say, look, we have British values. Say, brilliant. I want to have British values as well. What are values that are specifically British? One, huh? English breakfast. Yeah. BLT. Yeah. What else?
Tolerance, is it?
Yeah, they throw the phrase tolerance around a lot, which...
Really?
Yeah. So
you never heard of the British Empire? How tolerant was that?
The British haven't heard of the British Empire, I have.
The British haven't heard of the British Empire, but you have. Brilliant. If tolerance is uniquely a British value, then it means no other society has tolerance. Yeah? You understand? Because if it's a British value, then it's a value that no one else has. France doesn't have it. Switzerland doesn't have it. Sweden doesn't have it. New Zealand doesn't have it. India doesn't have it. So if you were living somewhere else, you wouldn't be tolerant. But because they are benevolent enough to let you live in this country, mashallah, you now have tolerance. Well done. Can you see that? So what is a British value? Please tell me. I'm being serious. It's a serious question.
Democracy.
There is no British value, really.
No such thing.
Ahsan. So democracy. Well, where did democracy come from? It came from Greece.
Rule of law.
Are you saying nowhere else has rule of law?
Liberty.
Nowhere else has liberty?
And mutual respect.
So nowhere else has mutual respect? These are 4 things. These are values that are mentioned in the Quran. These are values that are mentioned in the Enlightenment. They're not specifically British values. Liberty, if you look at the history of the Enlightenment, is actually more a French value. It's in the history, it's actually in the French Constitution, isn't it? It's not in the British Constitution. We don't have that. So when we say British values, it's a misnomer. It is there to trick you. It is there to say that there are certain values that are specific to this group of people which you cannot have. And the only way for you to have it is if you assimilate into the British society. But there is no value that is specifically British. It's a misnomer that is used to trick you. And as my friend in the corner, I can't see him, stated, there are no such thing as British values. All of these values can either be universalized or particularized to a number of different regions or historical trends. This is the third argument of the far right. And fourth, this comes off the back of the third, this is very important, they believe in something that is called the Judeo-Christian society. Have you heard that term? Yeah? What's a Judeo-Christian society? A society that's built off the back of Judeo-Christian values. Yes? So they believe that the West is built off the back of Judeo-Christian values. Tell me something. Where did that term first come from? Who knows? That term was first coined, as in there's academic studies done on this. The term Judeo-Christian, the first time it ever appears anywhere academically in the history of the world is after World War II. Why? Because the West, apologetic for what it did to the Jews of Europe, after massacring several million of them, wanted to make them feel more welcome and created a term to say that you are not separate from us. And as you know, much of the massacres were done in the name of Christianity, so we have a Judo-Christian civilization now. It's only been there for 60, 70 years. So I ask you, what about the West is particularly Judeo-Christian? Because when I read the Bible, actually it's very similar to the Quran, isn't it? In some ways. What value is there in the Judeo-Christian civilization that is not mentioned in the Quran or the Ahadith? Whether you take the Old Testament or the New, which one? There isn't one. Now, again, this is a misnomer. One of the Marajih was talking about this so beautifully. He says, help me understand this. Tell me something. Where was Judaism first established? Which country? Yeah, Palestine. Before that, Egypt. Fair? But Palestine, yes? Where was Christianity first established? Palestine. Tell me, what part of the world is Palestine in? Middle East. Tell me, where was Islam established? Mecca and Medina. Which part of the world is that? Middle East. So why is it that the Muslims feel so otherized in the West when all three of those religions came from exactly the same region? Oh, it's a Judeo-Christian civilization, is it? Brilliant. Which Judeo-Christian value is not there in Islam? Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi raised this point and he said, it's all from the Middle East. What do you mean that it's exclusive now to the West? Go and sit in a church. Go and sit in a synagogue. Read the texts. Which one is different? The problem is, otherization is so normal for people. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, said so interestingly and beautiful, Bada al-Islamu ghariban wa sayaudu ghariban tuba lil-ghuraba. Islam was initiated, began as gharib, and it will return and end up as gharib. So therefore, congratulations to those who are the ghuraba. Don't worry about it. They tell you you're not welcome here, they tell you it's a completely different civilization, even though none of it makes sense. Don't worry about it. فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَى. Congratulations to those people. Now, as we have seen, we have these four arguments that now end up being proliferated, believed, imbibed, regurgitated. Eventually people believe it, and then this ends up in the mainstream society such that others get buy into these different sorts of ideas. So therefore we need to be able to now come to the question of how this gives rise to the issues of populism and how it gives rise to being present in the mainstream. And what I brought with me is a number of important books to be able to show you and to be able to explain some of these points to you. First, I just want to be able to show you this book and read to you some points. Here is a counter-Islamophobia kit, which we'll be looking through, inshallah, in the second half of our discussion to understand how to respond to Islamophobia. And they mention that there are 10 major themes about Islamophobia. What are the 10 major narratives that they use in the mainstream to otherize, to say bad things about Muslims? Number one, we are a threat to security. Number two, that we do not assimilate to the West. 3, that we are trying to be a demographic threat. 4, we want a theocracy. We want to establish a theocracy here. 5, we are a threat to identity. 6, we have a threat to gender equality. 7, that ontological diversity, Muslims are essentially different to everyone else in the world. 8, we are innately violent. 9, that we do not deserve citizenship. And 10, we will always have homophobia. Therefore, these are the 10 major narratives that are built about Muslims in the West. Now, this manifests itself in certain ways. Just to be able to show you certain books that if you want to be able to read in your own time. I brought with me Jan Werner Muller's What is Populism? Yeah, if you want to understand how populism rises, it's a short book. You can get through it in a couple of hours. I've studied this book, and it's well worth understanding that he says populism rises on 2 bases, primarily. Number 1, when you are anti-elite, and number 2, when you are anti-plural. If you have those 2 things joining together, you will see a rise of populism. Anyone who wants to study it, it is available. Another really good book is by Matthew D'Ancona called Post-Truth, the New War on Truth and How to Fight Back. And how lies, and this particularly looks at Brexit and particularly Donald Trump's rise, and how media were able to spread lies about Muslims, about immigrants, to scare them. We talked about this in a post-truth world in a previous night. Does anyone remember the definition of post-truth? That's why I said bring a pen and a pad, people. Yeah? Definition of post-truth is...
Currency of truth can no longer be relied upon.
Santon, well done to you. Well done to you. That the social currency of believing one another, truth, can no longer be reasonably expected. That you no longer reasonably believe that your politicians are going to tell you things that are true. You no longer believe that your media is going to tell you things that are true. So these are certain good books to be able to study the realities that are on the ground. Now, just to take this forward and how this manifests itself for the Muslim community, I bring with me the Center for Media Monitoring State of Media Report on Islam and Muslims. This is really interesting, and in a minute I'm going to show you a really interesting headline. So this book looks at, study looks at how Muslims are treated and talked about in the mainstream media. And they use 5 key metrics to measure Islamophobia and the rise of the far right in the mainstream media, right? And they use 5 metrics. Number 1, negative behavior. How Muslims are specifically told that they in particular have negative behaviors. Our values are negative behaviors. That's all we do. We have bad behavior. Number 2, how we are misrepresented in the media. 3, how there's generalizations about us in the media. 4, prominence. How there is a prominence about certain names, certain words, certain terms about us in the media. And number 5, imagery and headlines, and how the imagery and the headline is used to distort the reality of Muslims, and how the far-right media do this on a daily basis. Should I show you one? This one's really fun. Are you ready? Okay, so this is on Twitter. I myself came across this, and I can't see it, so you're going to have to help me read it out. What's the date at the bottom? 29th? July 2019. So we're talking really recently, yeah? This is from the Daily Fail. Oh, sorry, I meant Daily Mail. Or maybe I meant the Daily Hail Hitler. Yeah? Now, this is
Express.
Oh, sorry, from the Daily Express. Sorry, there's no difference between the two. So now, actually, this is the headline, yes? And then we're going to go into actually what was in the article itself. Can you read just one person, what is the actual title there?
Islamic Caliphate is in rural England, 35,000 to pledge allegiance in mass conversion ceremony.
Okay. I'm just bringing it up on my phone, hopefully. Nope, that's not it there. Just read it out again for us, inshallah.
Islamic Caliphate.
Islamic Caliphate.
In rural England.
In rural England.
And then it says 35,000.
35,000.
To pledge allegiance.
To pledge allegiance.
in mass conversion.
In mass conversion ceremony. Did you guys hear about this mass conversion ceremony? I would like to have been invited to it. I mean, I would love to convert someone. If you convert someone to the faith, I mean, it's Jannah for you, right? Let's take the first two words. What's the first two words? Islamic Caliphate. Now tell me, is the word Caliphate a positive word? Yeah? What does it talk about? When you think of Caliphate, what do you think of? Daesh. Yes? Right? So immediately you think of the Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, for example. Yeah? So that's the starting. Islamic Caliphate in rural England. So what's rural England? What does that give us an image of? Farms. And who tends to live in rural England? White people. Yeah? So the rural part is like it's farms, it's leafy, sleepy villages, you know, everyone gets their nice life, you know? It's the pub evenings that you get to go to. So the caliphate is descending on rural England, white England.
35,000.
How many people? 35,000. That's a lot. That's a lot of Muslimics coming to rural England. Because if you're a village of 700, 2,000, and 35,000 of these crazies are coming along, you're really outnumbered, aren't you?
To pledge allegiance.
To pledge allegiance. Bay'ah. Right? They're coming to pledge allegiance to the caliphate.
In mass conversion.
In mass conversion ceremony. What does a ceremony sound like? What does the word ceremony make you think of here? Yeah, but like, you know, if you're already thinking of the lines of the whole context of the statement, you know, when you get like Scientology and, you know, like these crazy people, there's a ceremony to convert. I've never seen there need to be a ceremony for any conversion. It's two lines. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, khalas. But they don't know that, do they? So this was the Daily Express, the headline. Now can you imagine, if you already believe that Muslims are trying to convert everyone, and Muslims are already violent, caliphate is coming over, all this nonsense, if you believe it, what's that headline going to do to you? Fear. Absolute fear. Now say it. Can you go to the actual article? I want you to remember, look at the difference between the headline and then you open up the actual link and then look at the title. What does it say? What does it say?
It says Muslims from over 100 countries will descend on Alton in English countryside to pledge allegiance to a global caliphate this August.
Seems to be a bit different, doesn't it? The actual headline and then the article inside, they're not the same thing. Now actually, do you know what this was? This was the Ahmadi community, who most Muslims don't consider to be Muslim. This was the Ahmadi community having their own conference, where Ahmadis from around the world were invited to a conference to speak about Islam. So yes, maybe 35,000 did come, but there was no conversion ceremony, and they weren't descending, and they weren't ceremonializing all of this stuff. There was 35,000 Ahmadis that came for a weekend and had a little conference. Now most people aren't going to open the article, read it, go on to Wikipedia and ask, well, who are the Ahmadi community? Let me try to understand them. All they're going to see is the title. Caliphate comes to sleepy London, sleepy Britain. You have to understand what's happening in front of your eyes and the way in which these people work, these far-right organizations. There is scaremongering tactics that are being had from all over the place that these individuals are trying to do. Thank you.
I think what they've done is that the Imam, or this new guy who's probably come up, they're actually giving him the allegiance.
Yeah.
As a,
Yeah, they're probably giving him the Imam the allegiance. And as you can see, even the imagery was quite, negative as well. So this is the way in which the media works, much of them, and then people get scaremongered back into the belief systems of those four previous white supremacists arguments. And of course, then it comes out on different places. It comes out into mainstream media. It goes out into Telegram, into 8chan, into Gab, and all these very far-right places that they sit on the internet. I have the pleasure of being on a Telegram group of Tommy Robinson News, James Goddard News, and I exaggerate not. Every day there are about 30 messages. Everything is either anti-stories, anti-Islam or anti-immigration. One of the two. Nothing else. Nothing else. And I'll show you it. You open up, it's thousands of messages from people sharing scary stories about Muslims and immigrants. This is what they are being fed every single moment of every single day. Now, we have to turn quickly to the topic of the solutions that we have to be able to bring to the far right. And of course, we have to always start with the example of the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Our Prophet and the way in which the Quran speaks about this issue is so beautiful and so interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, for example, in chapter number 7, Surah Al-A'raf, verse 157, that for those people who believe, فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِهِ, those people who believe in him, the Prophet, وَعَزَّرُوهُ وَنَصَرُوهُ, they honor the Prophet, they help the Prophet, for them, they are considered amongst the muflihun. They're considered amongst the successful people. So we realize that we have to help Islam and we have to help the Prophet's name in this situation when so many people are actually attacking the Holy Prophet and our own religion. We have a responsibility to be able to do this. Now, I just want to mention 4 or 5 ways quickly to be able to think about how we can strategically defeat this rise of the far right. Number 1, as we said yesterday, we have to protect our children and not have any assimilation. There is a book I'll recommend to you, if you dare read it, which is by the name of The End of Europe by James Kirchick. James Kirchick is a far-right individual, and he wrote this book, The End of Europe, arguing that Europe is about to break down because of Muslims, basically. Yeah? And in there he mentions something really important, and I really want to emphasize this to parents and to youth. He mentions that as Weimar Germany was on the rise, he goes through the history of different European countries and how they respond, and he mentions that of all Europe, the Jews in Hungary assimilated most to European culture. Losing their language, the dress, the food, all of it. They assimilated the most. He says they weren't spared because they assimilated. The Jews were massacred in Hungary like they were massacred in any other part of Europe. Don't for a second think that your solution to defeating the far right is you assimilating, is you giving up your values, is you giving up your belief systems. In the end, you will both lose dunya and akhirah. The second advice that we give to you to defeat the rise of the far right is to turn this into an opportunity. You know, the other night we talked about the challenges and opportunities of a post-Brexit world, where Muslims can actually enter into the space and actually change the discourse in the entire country. This is a huge opportunity that Muslims have not yet taken advantage of. Let me give you an example. After 9/11 and the tragedies of 9/11, the world shifted in discussion. Here in this country, after 7/7, we shifted in discussion. There is a huge opportunity for you to sit with anyone from any faith, from any background, and say, the whole discussion in the country is to understand what Muslims believe in. Let me bring you in and teach you what we believe in. It's our 6th night, and I could be wrong. As far as I've seen, there is not a single non-Muslim any night that has come into this hall. How is that possible? How is that possible that we are so stubbornly keeping Karbala and the movement of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam to ourselves in a time when the entire world is begging to understand about what Islam truly believes. Do you not believe? Are you not confident in the movement of Hussein ibn Ali? Are you embarrassed or shy about it? That you can't invite one of your friends to the majlis? One out of all of the friends that you have to the majlis? All of the interfaith dialogue, all of the emphasis, it has culminated that in a period when we're talking about Islam in Britain and what Islam has to offer Britain, we haven't had one non-Muslim in this space in 6 nights. It's a tragedy. It means that really, we just want to be lemmings. We're just looking forward to the attacks on us. We're not doing anything actively to be able to export the faith and bring people with the opportunities that we currently have, in the freedoms that we have. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi says, opportunities are like clouds. If you don't take advantage of them, they will pass away. Right now we have freedoms. Brothers and sisters, take advantage of those freedoms. Otherwise, when they go tomorrow, don't complain when they have been taken away from you. Now, not only this, we have to understand that there's lots of scope. I remember I was studying, and we have to study a particular book in the Hawza, which is called Shara'i', and that's written by Shaykh al-Hilli, Muhaqqiq al-Hilli. And there's a mas'ala in there that is very strange. As you're studying this book, the mas'ala he says, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, Muhaqqiq al-Hilli says, it is makruh for you to pray if there is a Christian or a Jew in front of you or behind you. If you're praying right now, and a Jew or a Christian is in front of you or behind you or to the side of you, it's makruh for you to pray your salah. So I asked why to my teacher. He said, just give me an explanation. He said, look, we don't have a specific explanation, but maybe they'll mock the prayer, maybe that, that it will defile the prayer by them being in that space. Obviously, I'm going to use the word strongly, that's nonsense. But it's mentioned in the historical texts. Now, I asked him a question. Obviously, this is in Iraq, he doesn't have much knowledge of what happens on the ground here. I asked my teacher, I said to him, do you know what? Annually, we have what is known as Visit My Mosque Day. We open up the doors and we invite people of other faiths to come in. And when I've led this, me personally, as an example, we've had the videos, we've been able to, I would stand up and I'd explain what the adhan is, what the iqamah is. I'm now going to do my salah, and I'm explaining to you in advance what these movements are, what the qira'at is. The translation of it is going to come up on the screen. So as I'm reciting, you understand what's being recited. They understand it all. And they will sit to the side, they'll sit behind us and watch us. And of course, the purpose of this is to help them understand Muslim practices, not be afraid of the words Allahu Akbar, see the depth and the spirituality in our belief systems. Is it makruh? He said it's mustahab for you to do it. You see, the way in which we think about us religion, it's so backwards, or at least the way in which it's been given to us, and then we still hold on to this. Even the idea of having one annual day when we invite some people to come into the mosque. We have such a space where everyone's asking us, what do you believe in? Explain to me what jihad is. Explain to me the prophet, a prophet of war. Explain to me about your beliefs. Explain. Why are they not sitting in front of us at every opportunity in which they have? Number 2, in your region and in your city, you have to know this, that there are certain people from the far right who are prominent. We need to engage them. Genuinely engage them. With what attitude? The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, loved even his biggest of enemies. Loved them. Open the Quran. Read how the Quran speaks about the personality of the Prophet. You know what it says? فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ asafa. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu says, O Prophet, you will almost die out of grief for how much you want them to believe in your message. Just think about that. How much the Prophet loved these individuals. They threw feces on him. Yes or no? Yes? They threw feces on him. The Prophet loved them. He almost died out of grief because of how much he loved these individuals. There's a hadith about this verse. It's amazing. I want you to think about it. The narration says, one day the Prophet was given a gift of a red abba, a beautiful, thick, red cloak. You know, the Prophet, he didn't have much. So for him to be given something expensive, a garment that was going to keep him warm in the winter, it's something that he could have made use of, correct? You know what he did with it? The narration says, he walks to the door of his greatest enemy, Abu Jahl, the father of all ignorance. He knocks on the door. Abu Jahl opens the door. Rasulullah says, maybe you and I haven't spoken properly. We haven't got off on the right foot. Maybe you and I need to converse more. In order to do so, I give you this as a gift. Abu Jahl. You know what Abu Jahl did? Slammed the door in the face of the Prophet. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ. It's almost as if you'll be overcome by grief because of how much you want these people to be guided. You have far-right activists in Leeds, in Yorkshire. You need to be able to bring them into the mosque. We need to be able to converse with them, to show them the beauty of this religion. As an example, in this area, you have an individual by the name of Mark Collett, C-O-L-L-E-T, and Laura Towler, T-O-W-L-E-R. They're famous on Twitter, on Facebook. They engage. There are opportunities to bring them in and meet with them. We have to sit with these individuals and export it to them. I remember, I have a recording of it. I can play it to anyone who wishes to be able to hear it. I sent a message to one of my friends from the far right and told him some of the projects that we are doing to help people of white working class backgrounds, which we're going to talk about tomorrow in detail. You know what he responded to me? He said a voice clip. He and his, I believe it's his partner, they said, if you Muslims are working to help the white working class in these ways, you will win the hearts and the minds of the white people of this country. I have it recorded what he said. That's a member of the far right saying that to me. If we don't engage in dialogue, we will not be able to assist them. We also need to genuinely assist them with their concerns. The far right and the white working class communities here are socially and politically often deprived, economically deprived, such as so many of the Muslims. 45% of all Muslims in this country live in the bottom 10% of all the wards in this country. Half the Muslim country, half the Muslim population is in the lowest economic 10th. We understand the economic pains that you're going through. We want to be able to help. Lady Fatima al-Zahra, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayha, has a hadith where she says, جَعَلَ اللَّهُ الْعَدْلِ تَنْسِيقًا لِلْقُلُوبِ. Allah has made adal, justice, as a means of the hearts coming together. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam has a hadith where he says, مَا أُمِّرَةُ الْبُلْدَانِ إِلَّا بِمِثْلِ عَدْلٍ. Communities, countries, nations, they cannot rise unless there is justice between them. The right wing have certain concerns. LGBTQ questions, about their own economic situation. The Muslim community have an opportunity to genuinely engage with them, to be able to help them to understand Islam, and to be able to help them with their own personal and cultural circumstances. last one before I conclude is mentioned in this counter Islamophobia kit. And there's many, many, many more, but of course we don't want to take any more time than we already have. And I'm going to mention that they actually write 10 ways, strategic ways, to deal with the far right. Some of them are, strategic level, some of them are local community level. So far I've mainly mentioned the local community level ones. But I want to mention to you one in particular. So when I say this, hopefully I can't be considered as being something extreme, because it's actually produced in a document that is very important. Counter narrative number 7. If you want to defeat the rise of the far right and the rise of Islamophobia, number 7 of 10, you have to de-radicalize the state. The state itself, the government itself, needs to be de-radicalized. The government itself has to be de-radicalized. The people in the government, they themselves have to be taken out. They state, de-radicalization is understood here as the act of dissolving the categories of race, removing the ideas of race altogether, and their mobilizations. This is the process whereby the focus of action is on facilitating the recession of racial categorization and practices. For governments and state institutions, acknowledgement of Islamophobia as a symptom of deeper national structural issues and inadequate responses to racism is the starting point of where we need to go. We need to get the definition of Islamophobia into law, and we need to get Islamophobia itself as a prohibited racist act, and we need the actual government itself to de-radicalize itself. Listen to that. Not the Muslims. All this conversation that the Muslims need to de-radicalize themselves. Of course, we have the challenges, but the state itself needs to de-radicalize. We have this challenge, and all of us should be participating in this movement to help ourselves to overcome the challenge of the far right. I want to show you the example of what Awn Muhammad had to go through, and the difference between the times in which they lived in and how quickly a group can change from having positive values to shifting like they did on the 10th of Muharram. One of the ahadith about the time of the Prophet and the life in which he led, there's a narration that says that when the Prophet was on one of his battles, there was a moment where 3 of his companions were to fall one after the other. There was a culture in the Arab tribes that when one fell on the battlefield, but was not yet dead, there was a safety given to a water boy to be able to run to that individual who's lying injured, and give them water freely. That water boy is not to be attacked. So the narration mentions that 3 of the companions, one after the other, fell. The water boy ran to the first one and offered him this water. The first companion said, "Don't give me the water, give it to the next one." The water boy ran from the first to the second, and he offered him the water. The second said, "Don't give it to me first, give it to the third." And he ran to the third, and the third said, "Don't give water to me first, go back to the first." The narration says, as the water boy ran back towards the first had already parted from this world, thirsty for the sake of the second. As they ran towards the second and offered him water, the second had also died thirsty for the sake of the third. And when they had reached towards the third, that had always died as well. Can you imagine what it was like on the 10th of Muharram, when these 2 children of Sayyida Zainab alayha salam are lying on the battlefield? They are maybe 8 and 10 years old, or 10 and 12 years old. Yet when both of them were struck down, the army of Yazid, they had gone back on their own values so much that they had not even had the mercy in them to give water to those two beloved stars of Sayyida Zainab. On the night of Ashura, and on the day of Ashura, the mothers were preparing all of their children for readiness in the battle tomorrow. It is said that Layla would sit with Ali Akbar. Farwa would sit with Shah Qasim. And Zainab would sit with her beloved children, Awl and Muhammad. What does Zainab say to these two children when they are already aching to go and serve their uncle on the battlefield? What preparation words do you need to give? However, you can imagine that she is saying to her children, "Oh, my children, it is not that I don't believe that you will go and fight tomorrow. You will. But you have to make sure that you are the first of the family members to go. For how is it that I can stand in front of Fatima and say that the children of Layla or the children of Farwa, they went to defend Hussein before my own children went towards the battlefield? How does a mother say to her own two young sons, you go first into the battlefield. I do not want you to return. I do not want to see you come back." Throughout the afternoon, as all of the family members, as all of the companions were being massacred, these two children would come and beg for the opportunity to go and fight. They were always refused by Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. It came to the point now where Sayyida Zainab is impatient with her children. "Why have you not gone?" They say, "Our uncle does not allow us to go into the battlefield." We are told that Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam goes towards the Imam and says, "Oh my Imam, oh brother, tell me, is it not the case that throughout your life I have acted as a mother to you?" At this moment, we are told that Hussein begins to cry, realizing what is about to happen at this moment. "Indeed, you have treated me like I am your son. You have always looked after me like a mother would look after the son, oh my sister Zainab." We are told then that Sayyida Zainab says, "Then you are not allowed to refuse your mother any request. My request to you is to allow my sons now to go into the battlefield." We are told that at this moment, Awn and Muhammad enter in towards the battlefield. The ladies of the tents, they are sitting with Sayyida Zainab. They are going to want to console her as to what is about to happen to her children. They know what has happened to the other companions and towards the other children of the family members. At this moment, they go out in towards the battlefield. They both fight. We are told that the way in which they fought was back to back. And this was the way in which they ensured that no one could come towards them. If someone came from one side, they were able to defend their brother. But eventually, the army's commanders said, "These two warriors, if you want to be able to defeat them, you have to separate them from one another." Therefore, they tried their hardest. They must have showered them with arrows. They must have used the horses. And eventually, Awn and Muhammad are separated. Both of them are surrounded by the enemies. They are both attacked and they fall towards the floor. Why is it that the Arabs used to give each other water when individuals fell, but they could not give the children of Zainab water when they fell? As they were attacked and as they were being killed, we are told that they called out towards their family members. They called out towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, "Come to our aid. Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah." You can imagine the scene inside the tents. The ladies must have been shattered, broken at this moment, knowing what is happening to their beloved Awn and Muhammad, being attacked by the spears, being attacked by the swords. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam salam comes to find their torn bodies killed, he brings them back in towards the tents. We are told that the ladies come out and they are calling out, Wa Muhammadah, Wa Awna. Look at what has happened to our beloved nephews. We are told by our dhakirin that inside the tent there is one lady who is not crying at all, and that is Sayyid Zainab, for she would not cry for any of her children, for she did not want anyone to cry for her and her children. She always wanted to cry for everybody else's children. We are told that when Sayyid Zainab alayhi salam returns back to the city of Medina for that first time, she goes back towards the house. She comes towards the house, and we are told that her husband comes out and says, "Oh lady, you are a strange lady, tell me, you cannot be here in this area." She comes and she says, "Oh my dear husband, do you not recognize your own wife Zainab? My back has become bent from the amount of the heaviness of the chains. My hair has become grey from the amount of strife and trouble." We are told that she enters into that room where her two sons would be. We are told by our dhakirin that there are two sajjadas there, both one for Awn and both one for Muhammad. We are told that she sees these two prayer mats for her children, and this is the first time that she cried for her two sons. We will say to you, "O Lady Zainab, if you did not cry over your children, we will cry for you over your children." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. And if we are to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein.